Now, let's return as promised to Venezuela, that attack by a policeman stealing a helicopter and dropping grenades on the Supreme Court building. Well, that apparently hijacked police helicopter was seen circling the capital, dropping 4 grenades on the Supreme Court. The president called it an act of terrorism and said he'd activated the armed forces to keep the peace. A police officer, Oscar Perez, claimed responsibility for the act in a social media post. Well, let's head to our Washington studios. Let's speak to Natalia Duarte, an analyst at the Frontier Strategy Group, an advisory services firm that analyses countries. So thank you so much for being with us. This was an extraordinary attack today, another indication of Venezuela spinning out of control, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right. The turmoil has been happening for, especially in the past few months, it's just been getting increasingly out of control.
You advise people, investors. What are you telling them, and what have you been telling them over the last few months? Sure.
So we specifically advise many multinationals operating in emerging markets, and in this case in Venezuela. And what we are telling many of our clients right now is that the situation in Venezuela is not going to improve anytime soon, especially this year. And so we have been telling most of our clients to wait and see what will happen. But certainly things will not get better while Maduro is still in power.
And I talk about investors. Basically, have they been running for the hills?
Recently, I would say that not a lot of investors. We haven't seen a lot of investors in Venezuela. Many investors last year and the year before that were making contingency plans. Most recently, what investors are doing is just holding on.
I mean, as you said, and we've seen, and we're looking at pictures now of the scuffles, the interaction between the protesters, which have been there on the streets virtually every day, and the security forces. This has been going on for months. How did Venezuela get to be in this position, being such an oil-rich nation?
That's an excellent question, and you make a great point. Venezuela is, in fact, the richest oil nation in the country in terms of in the world in terms of reserves. However, what has happened in Venezuela is that most recently the government has been prioritizing its repayment of debts at the expense of food shortages, medical supplies, and even its own oil production. And so the country's at a point where, despite being the richest oil nation, it is in a situation where it is importing oil from other countries because it has not actually invested money in its own infrastructure in order to produce oil.
Just a final point, because after months of this sort of instability, to try to get to a position of stability, effectively, does one side or another have to win outright, the president or the protesters?
That's an excellent question, and here what we need to consider is actually the role of the military as well, because at the moment the military is the group that is helping the president stay in power. They are the group that is helping the president maintain control over the country. They are the group that is responsible for food distribution, for instance. And so the role of the military will be key in the next few months in terms of whether it remains loyal to the president or whether it decides to withhold its loyalty.
Well, we shall continue to watch. Natalia Duarte, thank you very much for being here on the programme. Thank you.